Father Andy Nguyen here, and it's a beautiful Sunday this morning. And as many of you are regular participants at the Mass on Demand at St. Francis Xavier, today I'd like to give you a bit of a orientation of the context of the Mass on Demand from where we're broadcasting, especially those of you who are participating from interstate in Australia or elsewhere in the world. Every day you see one view of the church and its inside, so today we'll have a bit of an architecture tour and a history tour of this church, a significant church in this area and also in Sydney, St. Francis Xavier Church. I'm standing here in the veranda of the church, and to my left is the south that we're looking towards Sydney in the area of Lavender Bay, and down there in the late 19th century, we could see Lavender Bay, which is named after George Lavender, an early settler of this area. And the church is oriented east-west, so the entry to the church is facing west, and the sanctuary is facing east. St. Francis Xavier was built in 1881 in the Gothic Revival style, which is the predominant church architectural style of the time, and perhaps also in other English-speaking world. So it's quite a church architecture of the day. And the second Archbishop of Sydney, Roger Bede Vaughan, seeing the expansion of population, and especially Catholic population in the North Shore of Sydney, invited the Jesuits to come to North Shore of Sydney and to minister in the area. And in 1877 he invited the Jesuits, and the same year two Jesuits arrived and started to look for land to build the church. And there was also our other church in North Sydney, St. Mary's, was also built around the same time. And they found a piece of land here in Lavender Bay, and bought the piece of land and beginning to build the church around that time. And so William Ward Wardell, an English architect, was commissioned to design St. Francis Xavier. He's quite an influential architect at the time because he was the one designed and built St. Patrick Cathedral in Melbourne and St. Mary's Cathedral in Sydney, the current version, as well as the Jesuit Church in Richmond, Victoria, Melbourne, St. Ignatius Church. And you can see behind me also a school hall, which was built shortly after the church was complete. And so what you're seeing here is the original 1881 building with the spire complete in 1881. And so I'm fast forwarding to the post-war era. In the 1940s and 50s, a greater expansion of population, and the church needed to expand, but we didn't have money to build to do the expansion and renovation until the early 1960s. And so now we are going to walk to the new entrance of a church behind me that was completed in 1964. So in 1962, a local architect was engaged to design the expansion for St. Francis Xavier's, Hearst Kennedy Architects. And you can see behind me such a contrast between the 1881 design and the very bold and modern design of the 1960s, just before Vatican II. Now we are in the 1964 addition to the church. Behind me, as you can see, a very rectangular building addition, and then to my left is the 1881 original church building. The major feature of the 1964 addition to St. Francis Xavier Church is the stained glass window behind me, and it is to depict the story of the Christian life. And on the far left, symbols of sacrament of baptism. Following that, symbols of the church. You can see the key of Peter, the tiara, the commandment, the 10 Commandments, scriptures. Following that is symbol of sacrament of penance. And behind that, above the statues of Our Lady, is her symbol, Mary, and the pierced hearts. And following that is the symbol for Eucharist. You can see the loaf of bread, the grapes, and the host and the chalice. And following that is the symbol of the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ, and it completes with the at the end with the symbols of the 7 sacraments, with the Sacred Heart and the 7 gifts of the Holy Spirit surrounding that. So now we are standing in the 1881 part of the building, and you can see behind me the deviation between the old part and the new part, where the transept is mirror from the one on my right. A lot of the original decoration of the 1881 church has been removed during the renovation, the interior renovation in the 1950s, but we have found, rediscovered the Station of the Cross, and it was put back in the 1960 renovation and expansion. So behind me is the original altar and amber pulpit of the 1964 design. If you imagine that before Vatican II, the altar is 3 steps higher than where it was now, but still remained off the wall. And the pulpit was in the same position as it was in 1964, but without the altar rail around the front of the sanctuary. The altar rail now repurposed into the benches that you see on the back of the sanctuary. To my left is the original transept, which mirror the other side that has been demolished for the extension, and now it is the Eucharistic chapel. So now we are standing in the transepts, the 1881 transept, and many of you know about St. Mary MacKillop, the first Australian saint. And while she was residing in Mount Street, North Sydney, not too far away from here, she regularly come down to St. Francis Xavier for Mass and prayers. And the latest addition of stained glass window to the church has a figure of Mary MacKillop and her sisters, and behind them is the image of St. Francis Xavier Church, as well as the presbytery opposite the street. And on her right is a image of 3 Jesuits, the first 3 Jesuits that staffed the parish here at St. Francis Xavier. So thank you for joining me today on this virtual tour of St. Francis Xavier. I hope it gives you a bit of context of our place, the community of faith here at St. Francis Xavier and at Our Lady of the Way Parish in North Sydney. And God bless.